And of course, she went and got her own mother, the baby's mother. And she brought her mother into the castle of Ramses II, and it was she who raised up her own child. They gave him the name Drawn Forth, or Set Free, because he had been set free from the river. Moses, they called him. And for 20 years, Moses was raised up as if he were a prince of Egypt. He was raised up to worship Ra, the sun god. He was raised with power and privilege, and even though his mother may have occasionally told him about these people called the Israelites, he didn't know that he was an Israelite until his 20th birthday. And on that day, his mother took him out of the castle, out of the life of privilege where he had drank his wine from a golden cup, and she took him down to the slave pens of Egypt, and she said to him, "Moses, you are not an Egyptian. These are your people." And she pointed to the slaves laboring under those great stones and under the whip of the slave drivers. "This is who you are," she said to him. And on that day he saw an Egyptian slave driver beat one of the Israelite slaves to death, and he was so filled with rage that he ran at that slave driver and took hold of him and killed him with his bare hands. And then he buried him in the sand. The next day he was so compelled by this thought that he belonged to the slaves and not to the king that he went back out. And when he did, he found two Israelites fighting amongst themselves. And he said to them, "Stop fighting, you are the same family." And they turned on Moses and said, "What are you going to do? Kill us like you did the slave driver?" And then Moses realized that his secret was out. Someone had seen him kill the Egyptian. In fact, at that point, the king knew that he had, and he declared that Moses must be put to death. So Moses ran off and hid. He ran to the deserts of Midian. There at a well, he defended the 7 daughters of a man called Jethro. They took him home to their father, Jethro, the priest of Midian. Jethro received him. Moses then married Zipporah, one of the daughters of Jethro, and began a family. His first son's name was Gershom, which means foreigner, because that's what he was in Midian. And he adopted the life of a Midianite shepherd. And there are some interesting things we need to know about Moses during his time in Midian with Zipporah and with Jethro. First of all, this. We describe Jethro as a priest of Midian. And because we call him a priest, people think, well, he must have been like an Israelite worshiping Yahweh. But in fact, that's not what Jethro was. Jethro was a worshiper of Baal, the god of fertility, the god of nature. And for the next 40 years, that's what Moses was. He turned his back on the God of Israel and became a worshiper of Baal. And the worshippers of Baal worshipped all things in nature and believed that Baal was in all living things. They would often bow down before trees and bushes and worship them because in the desert, anything alive was a sign of God's presence. So remember that Jethro was not an Israelite, he was a Baal worshiper. And remember this, once Moses had hidden out in the deserts of Midian, he did not immediately encounter the burning bush. It's not as if he went and saw it and came back. He spent a lifetime in Midian. 40 years he spent there, an entire career. He completely forgot about his people and where he was from. Until one day, after 40 years, when he should have been considering retirement, he was out in the deserts near Sinai. And all of a sudden, off to the side of the pathway, a bush burst into flames. And Moses said, "This is strange. I must go closer and see what it is." And so he walked closer, and as he came closer, Scripture says, when God saw that Moses was drawing closer to the burning bush, God began to speak. "Moses! Moses!" came the voice from the burning bush. Now remember what Moses' name means. Set free! Set free, came the voice from the bush. And I wonder if Moses thought to himself for a moment, why is this bush saying, "Set free, set free"? Whom should I set free? And Moses knew immediately whom he should set free. The memory of his own people, the Israelites, slaves in Egypt. So when that voice called his name, Moses, set free, he knew exactly what was happening. When he had drawn close enough, the voice said, "Come no closer. I am the God of your ancestors, Abraham and Isaac and Israel. Take off your shoes. You are standing on holy ground." And Moses took off his shoes and fell down and covered his face. That's the call to Moses. Why did God choose to call Moses from a burning bush? Of all the strange images in the world, why couldn't God have used some other thing? Well, it's simple. Fire throughout Scripture is the symbol of God's presence. When God called Isaiah, it was with a temple filled with fire. When God would eventually lead the people out of Egypt, it was with a pillar of fire. When God gave his power to the people at Pentecost, it was with fire. So fire is always a symbol of the presence of God. But why the bush? I think you know. I mentioned a few moments ago what Jethro was in Midian, a worshipper of Baal. He had taught Moses to bow down before bushes and trees because they were filled with the god Baal.